Hello again, YouTube. Welcome again to my channel. My name is Prometea. I'm the Tyrannosaurus girl. First of all, I want to apologize for the terrible lighting, but this week has been kind of hectic for me. I didn't have a lot of time to shoot, and I depend on natural light as well as the life of other people in the home, so I ended up shooting at night because I prefer shooting in this condition rather than not uploading any video at all. So, on to the topic at hand. I'm continuing with my series Ask a Trans Woman, and the question I'm answering today is: how was for you the process of identifying with a different body? And well, that's not exactly the way I would put it, but I'm still going to try and answer that question the best way I can, keeping in mind, as always, that I'm answering from my own experience, and specifically it is very important to say that in regards to this question, because we have this idea, there is this standard narrative that every trans person knows that they are trans since a very young age, since they were 3 or 4 years old or something, and that is simply not true. I mean, it is true for some people, but definitely not for everybody. I wouldn't even dare to say that it's true for most. We have different stories, we have different experiences, different processes. Of course, there are people that figure this out when they are 3, but there are people that figure this out when they are 60. All these experiences are valid. There is no right or wrong way of being trans. Not one of these people is trannier than the other. So I'm going to only answer from what my experience was. And well, for me, I wasn't really aware when I was a small kid. In some ways, you could say that maybe I was. Thinking about it, maybe, yeah, there are some things that could indicate that I had some type of idea about it. But like most people, when I was a young kid, I really didn't think about gender that much. For me, I didn't know, and I was part of a very diverse group of friends with boys and girls, so a lot of our play went across gender borders, so it wasn't really obvious for me at a young age. But as I grew older, I did notice things that made me stand apart from the people around me and were not necessarily related to gender, but I was a bit of an outcast, like completely not in regards to gender. Today you would call me a hipster, except that none of my tastes were ironic. I tend to like music that other people liked, and I tend to think in the way that other people thought. I didn't quite fit in with the people my age, and eventually I was bullied about it. So I started looking for ways of fitting in, and I started to try to adapt into that, and I started repressing my own ideas and my own feelings and my own behaviors. And for some time I could find some type of middle ground about it, but eventually it got really out of hand. Eventually I started really repressing and taking a lot of care of being this person that I was supposed to be, that other people expected me to be, a role that they expected me to fill in, especially when I had some people depending on me, and I had to be strong for them, I had to be unmovable, and that was a character that wasn't really me, and it got really bad, I think, when I moved to Spain, and I was working in the real estate business, and so I was surrounded with people that were not very culturally cultivated, and they were all obsessed about money and then how to spend it partying hard as possible. I tried to fit into that. Like, I was interacting with these people like 24/7 because I didn't know almost anybody else in Spain. I let that grow into me. I mean, that was a mask that I was wearing 24/7 and that I couldn't take it off. It was really bad for me. And well, sometime after that I started feeling like really strongly that something was wrong with that. I couldn't tell what it was, but it was like when you're wearing clothes that do not fit well, you know that something is wrong, although maybe you cannot tell exactly what it is. I could tell that something was wrong, and so I started trying to break into that. It was really hard. But then I met this person. I met someone when they've been really important for me, and I'm eternally grateful for her, for all that she did for me, even though she thinks she did me wrong. Because this person was in some ways a mirror for me, and a very cruel mirror, in that she was very unforgiving. She could tell that there was something beneath all these layers and layers and layers of fakery. She couldn't quite tell it was me, she couldn't see me, but she saw something down there. She moved me towards working against that. She made me realize how much I still had to go to get down to the real me that was buried somewhere beneath all of that shit. And so I started digging, I started reconstructing this person, and eventually getting back more and more in touch with my emotions. Well, some things started to come up. There were some changes in me, very big changes. And at some point this started to have something to do with gender. Like at first I would start to identify with the LGBT community without thinking that I was one of them, because supposedly I was a straight guy. But somehow, even though I had previously behaved in ways that could be labeled as homophobic and transphobic and sexist too, I found myself feeling some type of connection with the LGBT community that I couldn't quite explain. Like, I would watch a piece of news about the LGBT community and the struggle, and I would end up crying somehow. And I didn't know where that came from. And I also had this fantasy, not a sexual fantasy, but just like a dream or a plan of someday having a rock band where all the musicians would be women and I would be the lead singer, but I would be dressed as a woman, except I would sing with my masculine voice. This is something that kept showing up in my mind, and eventually I had to talk about it with this person. And she very nonchalantly, she told me, "Oh, you're a crossdresser." I said, "A crossdresser? Okay, what the heck is that?" So I went to the almighty Google with that word and I looked it up. And for those of you that don't know, crossdresser means the same as another word that you may know, but it's not as common nowadays, which is transvestite. Both crossdresser and transvestite have the same origin. Trans means cross, vestite refers to dressing. So it's a person that dresses as what's a cross, as the opposite, as what they are not. And basically what that word really means, regardless of the uses that some people give them, is usually a guy that dresses as a woman, even though they don't identify as one, usually for sexual reasons, sexual arousal, to be with men or with women, or sometimes just because they like the clothes and they like the way that they feel when they are wearing those clothes. And so I went into the internet and I found this forum for cross-dressers, and I found a whole different range of people, from the stereotype that appears in some movies of that guy that dresses in a suit to work in a bank or stuff. Underneath they're wearing this garter belt and a bra, to people that were very afraid of their wives finding out about their desire to dress as women, and they would keep stashes of clothes and wigs and breast forms hidden somewhere in the house, and they would dress only when their wives and their kids were not at home. To transgender people, both trans men, trans women, who were in different stages on the transition. And there was even this guy who would dress in a latex suit that emulated the body of a woman and a rubber mask, who was very creepy to look at, but actually a very nice person. Seeing all those different people and sharing experiences with them, I realized that at least I wasn't a freak, that there were a lot of people with similar or somewhat similar feelings, and I wasn't alone. I wasn't a freak, I wasn't so unique after all. And it helped me deal with what I was feeling and understand it a bit better. And so at first I thought that I was something in between a man and a woman, so I took on the label of intergender. And then I sometimes change it to be gender, like both man and woman. And I started dressing up at home. I bought a few items of clothes, and I would just dress up at home when I was alone, and sometimes when I was with this person. And I shared that with a few different people who were fortunately very supportive of me, and I would feel great when I was dressed as a woman at home. But at some point, reading all about this and experiences this, I started to question whether I was supposed to go out dressed as a woman too, and if it was so, if I was supposed to dress sometimes as a man, sometimes as a woman, and where was the boundary, how I could tell whether I should be dressed as one or the other. So I started reading more and more about the notions of gender. And then I noticed how, in the Asian symbology, they have the yin and the yang energies, which are feminine and masculine, and they have a whole set of attributes associated with each. And then the Aboriginal people of America also have these archetypes and these notions of masculine and feminine attributes, and a lot of them were crossed. They didn't quite match between both cultures, and that made me realize how much gender is a cultural construct, and so how arbitrary in some ways it is. So I stopped worrying about that, and that was very freeing. But I said, okay, I'm just a person, I'm agender, not gendered, I'm just a person. That gave me the freedom to actually try and connect with what I really felt, what I really wanted to do. So not worrying so much about what was perceived as feminine or masculine, but just connecting with what I wanted to be, I wanted to do. That led me to a lot of changes in my presentation and in my life. I quit my job, I got a different career as a massage therapist, and I started connecting much more with my spiritual and emotional side. And my appearance started changing, but it was naturally, it was organically. I started to present in ways that are perceived more as feminine. But it wasn't rationally thinking, okay, I'm going to dress as a woman. It was, I like this item of clothing. I like to wear my hair this way. I like to groom my body in this or that way. And I like to gesture in this or that way. And as I went deeper and deeper into the process, something that happened quite naturally was that I started to frequent more activities that were not reserved for women, but where usually the attendance was mostly, if not completely, formed by women. And something that I noticed was, well, in Spanish, all the adjectives have gender. So if you're welcoming people somewhere and you say welcome, you use a gender word for that. In the same way that in English you would say hello guys to 5 women and 1 guy instead of hello girls, hello ladies, or whatever, in Spanish just 1 man changes that word from feminine to masculine. So oftentimes in these places I would be surrounded by women, and the presenter or the instructor would say the masculine word for welcome in plural, or even worse, they would say the feminine word in plural, and then looking at me they would say y bienvenido, and welcome using the singular masculine form. And that really irked me. It bothered me a lot, and I didn't know why. So I started to try and listen and see why that was pissing me off so much. The answer came on its own. In one of these places I met a bunch of doulas, which I'm going to leave a link in the description because I don't have enough time to drift off and explain what that is. But basically a doula, if you don't know, is a person that works in the care of a pregnant woman during the late stages of pregnancy, during labor, and then sometime after the labor too, to provide emotional support, to provide information about what you can expect, and also relaxation techniques. And she basically makes the job of the midwife way easier, and she helps guarantee that that day is going to be the most special day possible. And that's a role usually reserved for women. Well, I met a bunch of doulas, and 2 of them were the directors of the National School for Doulas, and one of them took me to the side and told me, you have to take these classes. You have to be a doula. She didn't really give me much room for choice, but I said, okay, I really would like it. And so I attended these classes, which were several months of very intense and intensive classes. And of course, again, it was all women and me, and all of the women really welcomed me like one more of their own. Ironically, the only person that had any type of issue with my presence there was a male gynecologist that delivered one of the classes. And when he says a few things that he really didn't think through very well, all of the women ganged up around me and they stood up for me, which was amazing. And this whole process ended up being very personal for me, so much that I couldn't focus so much on all the information that I was being given, but it ended up being a more emotional journey for me, and a very deep connection with my own femininity and the women in my ancestry, so much that I realized by the end of the course that I want to be a mom. And of course I don't delude myself. I know that biologically I won't be able to carry a baby in my womb. There is some research being done in that area, but it's probably going to take a while, and I'm too old already to qualify. But the emotional link between a mother and their son is very different from that of a father and their son. And that for me determined that I was not intergender, I was not bigender, I was not agendered, and I was certainly not a man, that I'm a woman. That for me was the end of all ambiguity. And with that realization, then I took some more conscious steps towards adapting my body eventually I started presenting full-time as a woman. But then what I'm doing with my body, what I have already done, and the medical steps I will take in the near future, are not then of identifying with a different body, but more towards aligning my own body to me, to who I really am, to what really I am. So it's like taking these ill-fitting clothes to a tailor to have them adjusted for me. So rather than identify with a different body, what I'm doing is re-identifying my own body to myself. I'm taking it back, I'm reclaiming my body. So that is how this process went for me. That is my experience, and as I said, thinking about it, maybe I had some clue when I was younger, but I repressed it. That's how I ended up figuring out that I was a woman when I was already 30 years old. I had some idea about it. I mean, this process took a few years, but the realization itself came when I was 30. And there are people who figure this out when they are already retired, and some people struggle with it all of their childhood. All of these situations are valid, but well, I wanted to share my story. So thank you very much for watching so far. I really appreciate you being here. And well, I'm looking forward to your comments, to your experiences, and to your questions as well. And if you like the video, please subscribe to my channel for new videos every week. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. And well, thank you again for being there. See you next Friday.